It's Monday, and that so happens to be the day that I like to talk about monsters. Hello, and welcome to Monster Mondays. I'm Jeff Arbuckle, co-host of the podcast Film Seizure, that you can catch each Wednesday at filmseizure.com or at a number of podcast providers online. This week, it's time to return to Hammer and the good Dr. Frankenstein. Well, okay, maybe not good per se, because this 1964 third installment of Hammer's Frankenstein franchise is the Evil of Frankenstein. Now, in this installment, we break a little from continuity of the previous two films. I mean, fair enough. It's hard to really want to stick to a strict continuity in monster films. I mean, this is something that even Universal struggled with in the 30s and 40s. Hammer's own Dracula franchise was a little wonky at times with continuity as well. Now, what makes this entry a little more interesting is that the script was not originally written for the screen. Instead, it was a submission for a series called Tales of Frankenstein, which itself was a proposed TV series co-produced by Hammer and Columbia Pictures. That series was never picked up, but this story treatment by Peter Bryan was adapted by Anthony Hines for The Evil of Frankenstein. This is also the only Hammer film that was financed by Universal Pictures. So that led to the creature, played by New Zealand wrestler Kiwi Kingston, having a look that was maybe a little closer to the classic Universal version. Hammer had always avoided looking too much like the Jack Pierce design because Universal was known to be very protective of its classic monsters looks, and Hammer didn't want to attempt anything that could get it sued by Universal. Now that also means, though, with Universal's involvement, that Dr. Frankenstein gets a little more elaborate lab set for the film too. And a couple of years later, the film even got a few more scenes shot to have it better fit American television time slots as well. So the movie begins in a remote wooded area where a little girl witnesses someone stealing a corpse. As she runs away, she runs directly into Dr. Frankenstein, but then runs away from him while he waits for this corpse stealer, basically, he's kind of hired to return with the body so that he can extract the dead guy's heart. Now, the girl eventually identifies the Snatcher and Frankenstein, which means they need to get out of Dodge fast. And then Frankenstein and his assistant, Hans, who basically sticks around to work with Frankenstein instead of going to college, because he wants to learn the things that Frankenstein learns, not the stuff that colleges would teach him. He thinks that Frankenstein has a little bit different insight into the scientific world. So they end up traveling to Karlstadt, which is where Baron Frankenstein is from. And 10 years prior, Frankenstein was forced out of there too. But he claims that nothing ever really happens in Karlstadt, and they don't really have that long of memories in the town either. And it is a town also apparently full of assholes because some guys are kind of messing with a poor mute girl's bowl that she bakes for money out of and knocks it out of her hand, tries to take it from her, tries to steal from her. But, maybe Frankenstein will fit right in here. But what's more is that currently the town is absolutely packed for a carnival, and the good doctor thinks it's a stroke of luck as the crowd provides them a lot of cover. What's not so great, though, is that Frankenstein comes to Karlstadt to recover some valuables from his castle, only to find that it's been completely and totally looted. And he retells the story to Hans about his past experiments. And he wants to basically recontextualize what people think about life and how it's really just a series of action and reaction that is manipulated by an outside force, which is, in this case, the body. Now, in a flashback, Dr. Frankenstein tells of his first reanimated creature. The creature is not violent, but scared, and he kind of struggles with his own existence. And the creature really isn't able to easily eat cooked or prepared food, opting instead to eat raw flesh. One morning, the creature got out and started eating the livestock of the locals. And this ends up creating a big issue for Frankenstein and the creature, because now the police are getting involved, and the police attempted to arrest Frankenstein, but he was able to get away when the police and the locals shoot at the creature, causing the creature to fall over a cliff and seemingly to his doom. And Frankenstein tells Hans that he will not be stopped when it comes to proving his theory about life. Frankenstein and Hans then go to the carnival, using the crowd and masks purchased from a street vendor to blend in and avoid being identified. And at the restaurant, he sees the burgomaster and the policeman who initially intended to arrest him 10 years ago. That policeman is now the chief of police. And Frankenstein loses his cool when he sees a ring that once belonged to him on the hand of the burgomaster. And in the commotion, the police chief says that he recognizes Frankenstein, so they have to run away, and they go into the tent of Zoltan the hypnotist. And this will give Frankenstein an idea for later. Hold on to that thought. But first, Frankenstein burst into the burgomaster's home to discover that basically everything he ever owned has been confiscated and basically been taken by the burgomaster himself. And once again, Frankenstein is about to be arrested when he makes a daring, almost James Bond-like escape out of the burgomaster's bedroom, inhabited by the burgomaster's busty lover. Now, as Hans and Dr. Frankenstein leave town, the mute girl that we saw at the when they were coming into Karlstadt, named Rena, followed them. As thanks for interrupting the guys who were teasing her and stealing from her earlier, she gives the duo a place to stay out of a storm. Basically, she lives in a cave in the mountains, and so she just basically invites them to stay with her for the night. The next morning, Frankenstein discovers that his original prototype creature is encased in ice within this same cave. And when he was chased off 10 years ago, the creature must have fallen into the mountain's glacier, which preserved him all this time. Now, risking being caught, he, Rena, and Hans return to his castle where he intends to revive the creature. However, he makes the creature able to wake up, come to life, but there's no real connection between mind and body. So Frankenstein needs a way to connect directly with the mind. He can do everything he can physically for the creature, but he can't get a spark out of the creature's brain. He's more or less awake, but kind of comatose. So Frankenstein wants to have Zoltan the hypnotist help him, and Frankenstein wants Zoltan to stimulate any thought within the creature's mind, and that should be able to be used as a catalyst that Frankenstein wants to, that would allow Frankenstein now to connect the mind and the body for the creature to have full life again. And Zoltan is successful in placing the creature into a trance. When Zoltan wakes the creature up, the creature goes wild until Frankenstein chloroforms him. However, Zoltan has some less than scientific ideas. What's also true is that Zoltan is kind of taking advantage of Dr. Frankenstein. He's the only one who can tell the creature to do anything. So he's kind of overstaying his welcome in the castle, but he's also being thrown out of Karlstadt by the burgomaster and the police chief because he doesn't have a license or whatever to do his show with the carnival. So Zoltan wants to use the creature as an instrument of revenge. He has the creature go around robbing things like a petty thief. And then before long, he has the creature go out against those that have wronged him. And yeah, soon the burgomaster shows up dead. And that's not exactly what Zoltan wanted. Zoltan just wanted the burgomaster and the police chief punished, not killed. And moreover, Frankenstein has learned what Zoltan has done to his creature, and he's pretty pissed off too. So he evicts Zoltan out of his castle, and Zoltan manages to then tell the creature to kill Frankenstein. However, Frankenstein the creature basically tired of all these jokers telling him what to do, whether it's Frankenstein or Zoltan or whatever, kills Zoltan and then it heads out into the night. Now, when the police chief arrives at the castle, he arrests Frankenstein for murder, and Frankenstein tries to tell him that the village is in danger from the creature and that Zoltan has basically sent this creature into a fit of rage, but that only leads to police brutality to shut him up. And so then Hans discovers that Raina is with the creature in her cave. That sentence is a lot more suggestive now that I read that back than I intended that to be, but seems as though the creature has a special bond with the mute girl. They're both kind of simple people who are misunderstood by the public. And as the town organizes a mob to find and destroy the creature, Frankenstein escapes from the police station. And as he returns to his castle, the creature's emotional state begins to deteriorate. And Frankenstein has Hans and Raina leave while he tries to calm the creature down. But the creature accidentally sets the lab on fire, which leads to an explosion that kills the creature and Frankenstein. Now, let's talk about 3 things I like about the Evil of Frankenstein. First, I kind of like some of the concepts that border on medical science in this movie. Like in the early scenes when Frankenstein extracts the guy's heart and then he plugs it into some machinery that he and Hans have to activate this massive machine to provide the power needed to make the heart pump on its own again. But to start, Frankenstein is pumping the heart manually with his hands until the machine can take over and keep it pumping. Okay, maybe the large machine is not terribly accurate, but I'm guessing there is something about having to manually pump a heart with your own hands to keep it going until something can basically take over for your manual, manual pumping of the heart's valves yourself. And also, I like the idea that Frankenstein can do everything physically, but he can't reach the creature mentally. So, there is this kind of idea, like he had said, that there's this kind of separation between the physical state of somebody's life and the emotional or the mental state of what gives something life. And so there's some interesting concepts there about trying to unlock the secrets of life by way of doing that, by basically figuring out what it is that causes something to be alive mentally and then what makes it react physically to life. But yeah. Those are things that are concepts in the movie that, while this movie isn't exceptionally well liked in the series, oftentimes considered maybe the worst of the Hammer Frankenstein movies, there are some ideas here that are interesting at the very least. Next, the lab set for Frankenstein's castle is considerably larger than the past movies. And in the previous Hammer films, he always seemed to be in kind of a small makeshift room that has a bunch of high-tech lab equipment that could revive a dead man. In fact, in the early scenes of this movie, where he and Hans are chased off, or from where they're chased off, that's a little bit more in line what we've seen his primary lab to be in the previous Frankenstein movies in the Hammer series. So this movie definitely has that Universal money because, yeah, he's got a castle with large rooms for lab work, just like in the Universal classics. And there's a lot of collecting lightning from the roof, things that look like something that Nikola Tesla would have created. And, all of that stuff is similar to the 1931 movie. And yes, even discovering the creature in ice is similar to the Frankenstein meets the Wolfman introduction of the creature. So this does kind of come off as a nice little mesh of the original 1930s Frankenstein movies and the 50s and 60s Hammer films. So yeah, it's kind of a nice little combination of those. Lastly, Peter Cushing is great. I mean, he's always great, but as Dr. Frankenstein, he's usually very cold and calculating. But there's a particularly great scene when he and Hans arrive in Karlstadt to discover that all of his stuff is smashed and looted and all of that. And seeing the place in the condition that it is, he laments Why can't they ever leave me alone? He just wants to do his science. And he is actually kind of sad and frustrated, but not in the way that he will lash out like he had in previous movies. He just wants to do his experiments, but those goddamn God-fearing idiots keep getting in the way. Even when he tells Hans about his very first experimental body he tried to reanimate, and how close he was to succeeding, only urged him to continue to go forward. He's not the guy we've seen in the previous entries of the movie. He comes off much more sympathetic in this movie compared to the previous and later entries. In fact, he is not the villain of this movie. He typically is in the past films, especially in the first Frankenstein movie from Hammer. But in this, really is Zoltan who basically sets everything in motion as a villain. Yes, he is messing around in God's domain, I guess you could say, but he's actually not the villain in this movie, and he's actually quite sympathetic, and you kind of understand his predicament of just wanting to do his experiments and his work, and he just can't be left alone. It's just, he's not really harming anybody who's alive, but they fear him and they fear what he creates, and it makes him into this villain that he really isn't. That wraps up this week's Monster Mondays. You can catch new episodes of Monster Mondays each Monday at filmseizure.com. Don't forget to follow Film Seizure at Facebook, Threads, Instagram, and Blue Sky. You can also subscribe to Film Seizure to get both the Wednesday morning Film Seizure podcast and the Monday afternoon Monster Monday show at your favorite podcast providers. We also upload the stuff to YouTube. You can also check out my website, bmovieanima.com, to read new reviews every Friday morning. Next time, we wrap up 2025 with another werewolf feature. This time, it's not the Werewolf of London, but the She-Wolf of London. And until next week, stay spooky.